At long last, Ferrari have identified the inherent flaw within their initial design of the SF-25, which has held them back for the whole entirety of the 2025 campaign thus far. To rectify this issue, an upgrade has been scheduled and signed off on, thus leaving us with just two questions. What is the upgrade? And just as importantly, when will it be ready for implementation on the SF-25? As with a quarter of the season already passed and being well over 100 points behind in the Constructors and almost the same amount in the Drivers' Championship, time is fast running out to salvage anything this year. Now let's get the simpler question of those two out of the way and go over the timeline of events for when we can expect to see this upgrade package on the car. Now, unfortunately for the team, as this upgrade is a fairly major undertaking for them, requiring a huge amount of time and resources, they're looking towards having this upgrade ready for either the British or Belgian Grand Prix much later in the year, around the halfway point of the championships. But what exactly is this upgrade all about? Why is it taking them such a huge amount of time to manufacture and have ready that it would take all the way up until the midway point of the season? We're talking about likely a partial, if not complete, overhaul of the car's rear suspension. The team has learned that the current mechanical platform, which on paper, alongside the aero changes they made on this year's SF-25, came with no drawbacks or setbacks. But this has not been the case for the team, and it's the same up and down the paddock, with many falling into that unfortunate situation with regards to data and real-world correlation. It is no secret this era of ground effect cars is the worst with regards to this aspect. And you cannot rely on your data with 100% certainty or accuracy. There are some things that these highly sophisticated systems simply cannot comprehend or be able to showcase with their data, and it can only be seen out in the real world when the cars hit the F1 circuits, which is why some teams do not see issues up until they actually go testing and pre-season testing. And unfortunately for Ferrari, that's been the case for them once more. Now, there's a lot of components that comprise and make up the rear suspension that the team could be making or changing rather in this instance. And I cannot say with any certainty, because the information we have does not include this, with regards to what is changing. So it could be a complete redesign. And if we're thinking about the timeline we have in terms of when this should be ready, it would make sense that it would be quite an extensive change. So I would expect to see maybe different suspension geometries for where they're positioned in terms of on the gearbox and just the mounting points. It could be a complete change of the actual suspension arm elements themselves. It could just be the kind of interaction with the actual car as well. So it is very difficult to decipher or make an accurate guesstimation with regards to what will be changing. But what we can say with certainty is it is aimed at making sure the car can run as low to the ground as possible, so they can extract all of the performance out of the car, both in qualifying but just, or perhaps more importantly, in the races, so they don't have such a dramatic penalty when they have to put race fuel into their cars. Now, by the time this is all ready and is actually on the cars, it's going to be too little too late for them to salvage anything out of this 2025 season. And this becomes little more than an exercise in PR training for them. A round of public relations to bring the fans and stakeholders alike back on board at this point in the campaign, which quite frankly should not please either side of this equation. It's no good coming good on potential at that point in the season when you actually gain nothing from all the time and effort and resources you put into actually showing there was potential in the car, particularly when we have 2026 just on the horizon later next year, and the team's efforts could have been placed much more in line with next year instead of the car this year. So essentially a whole load of promise but little to show for it. And with the team putting so much effort into actually rectifying this issue and not solely focusing on 2026 with the huge major technical changes with the new era of F1 coming into full force, I think we're looking at another situation which unfolded at the end of the previous cycle of generations. I'm talking about the start of this turbo hybrid era in 2014, when they were far behind the curveball, which really was the whole grid except for Mercedes. And I think we're looking at another potential problematic season like that for Ferrari next year. So I just do not see why you would waste so much resources and potential gains you could be making with next year's car and next year's engines instead of putting it on this year when the season is done. You cannot gain anything from it, and you can gain far more lap time for the same amount of time as you're putting into the 25 car instead of the 26. Essentially, I've heard engineers on record saying this, Toto Wolff there, on record saying basically for a week's worth of time in the wind tunnel with 25 and compare with 2026's cars, you can find half a tenth for the 25 car, whereas for the 26 car you could find up to half a second for the same amount of time in there. So really it just doesn't make sense if your timelines are telling you you're not going to be able to be competitive and maximize and extract performance out of the 2025 SF25 until the halfway point of the season. The championships are done. You may get a couple wins here and there, but what good is that if it's at the detriment of having a competitive car out of the blocks next year? Because of course there is always a knock-on effect. If you're behind the curveball at the beginning of a generation cycle, it is quite clearly that is going to kind of go further into the next season and the season beyond that, as you're always playing catch up. You're not starting on an equal playing field with that of your rivals. So I think Ferrari are shooting themselves in the foot, unfortunately, with the decisions that they're making. And that is where I'm going to wrap things up with this video. Hope everyone has found it very informative and you now have an understanding of where the issues have been with this SF25 since its inception all the way back in the winter or the halfway point of last season. If you have enjoyed the video, of course, do always leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new and have enjoyed this content here on F1 Unraveled. Alright everyone, I'll see you next week with the Imola Grand Prix and of course more videos on that. Catch you all then.